the NATO chief.
The way it was said is irresponsible. The truth is that what the leaders of the European Union are doing can undoubtedly lead to war, even to a third world war. Because if Europe dislikes something, it doesn't simply freeze funds, but it seems to just use them up. And today we see that Europe is suffering two consequences of all that has occurred. One of them is that Christmas markets cannot be held. Not only Hanukkah celebrations, but Christmas markets cannot be held in safety. And anyone who attends a Christmas market takes a significant risk in Western Europe. But what's also connected to this is that Western Europe is voluntarily starting to give up on preserving its own cultural and religious heritage. And because of this, even wishing Merry Christmas is now considered a political statement. The various good freedom and other English well wishes, whose English versions have become quite fashionable. And if one travels to the Arab world during the Christmas season, they'll be quite surprised to find that there, without any hesitation, hotels display superficial Christmas trees, meaning that they are slowly getting much closer to Christmas than Western Europe is. So there's an identity crisis. As a result of this identity crisis, there's a general uncertainty. And on the other hand, Western Europe faces a security challenge due to migration, which is also not independent of the identity crisis itself.
What also struck me, and I mentioned a couple of other things about the Australian attack, is that, again, the Western press, the liberal politicians following the most brutal political correctness, are unwilling to talk about who the perpetrators are. So known to the very last moment, it must be kept secret that these are in fact jihadist attackers with Pakistani roots. And as long as we don't admit this to ourselves, or obviously the Western world doesn't admit it to itself, or increasingly doesn't admit it to itself, the harder it will be to take meaningful countermeasures.
And we should add that Australia manages immigration much more strictly, considerably more strictly than Western Europe. So the European Union is once again preparing to cross the Rubicon, because what they are doing now or are about to do undermines every legal basis. We don't know if they will, because there are sensible voices in Europe, though a minority, but that would be tantamount to a declaration of war, and it has no legal basis. So I can only say that just as the international illegality of the Russian attack is beyond dispute, Russia attacked Ukraine, which is a clear violation of international law.
Similarly, there is absolutely no legal basis here for any frozen asset to be utilised within any legal framework.
And the danger of this is not merely that in any proceeding before an international court, the Belgian state, the states involved in this, the European Union, or a part of it, will be compelled to repay the assets.
A significantly greater danger than this is that in the ongoing battle for financial investments, Europe will disqualify itself. Because if Europe dislikes something, it doesn't simply freeze funds, but it seems to just use them up, and that's it. So everyone knows, and suddenly in Western Europe, among those affected, especially the Belgian government, the truth began to emerge that this money, in that form, they will never get back, as the European Union now intends.
What does the European Union say? That it somehow tries to package this gross violation by claiming it's actually a loan Ukraine receives. Then when the Russians pay reparations to Ukraine, they'll pay it back.
But then the Belgian Prime Minister, one of their ministers who hadn't seen the situation clearly until now, suddenly realized what they're saying, Russia won't lose this war, and it's the one who pays reparations that capitulates. As the European Union reached the same point today, it creates a construct that everyone knows is a lie or unworkable, but despite this, a majority can be secured behind it.
If enough votes are possible, we'll see Thursday or Friday.
Where do we stand in practice? Last week, by majority vote, by chance, by passing unanimity, they indefinitely extended the freezing of Russian assets, and the final step is still missing to actually use these funds.
What has happened so far is that the European Union currently has its own set of rules. These are, of course, the treaties. Now, let's say collectively the Treaty of Lisbon. This has a 122nd section, which absolutely does not apply to what it was used for just now. So that's the first violation. But undoubtedly, the proposal here was just that. Although this is a sanction measure, which has always been unanimously adopted by the EU heads of state and government, they should now secure this under another legal basis. This legal basis, it does not apply to this. This is not what it's about. It's clearly not about that, but rather that Russian assets be frozen under this legal pretext as well. So if unanimity for extending sanctions isn't available, it can be maintained on this basis. That's all that's happened so far. This is also a gross legal violation. This would be like taking someone else's money. These frozen Russian assets have no legal basis. It's like the union taking out a common loan. They can't avoid unanimity here. It's quite clearly a unanimous decision, because if there's no member state commitment behind it, it won't be a joint loan, plain and simple. But we don't agree to this, so this is also ruled out. And from this point on, there are no further solutions, because every other solution involves member state borrowing, or at least an increase in member state indebtedness. Europe should not be working for what is happening in Berlin now to prolong the war, but rather to end the war as soon as possible.
In countries, they are pushing the war madness with full force or with ever greater force. You know, last week's that...
Well, perhaps the most important statement came from Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General. This particular one, we must prepare for our great-grandparents' and grandparents' war. So here's a short clip.
And we must be prepared for the sheer scale of the hardships that our grandparents and great-grandparents were forced to endure. And just try to imagine a devastating conflict of that immense magnitude, one that would reach into every single home, impacting every workplace. Consider the widespread destruction, the immense and unavoidable mass mobilization of an entire population.
The issue is the NATO chief. The way it was said is irresponsible. The truth is that what the leaders of the European Union are doing can undoubtedly lead to war, even to a third world war. This is a real threat, which is why we must firmly say no to these Brussels aspirations. The question is whether Europe, whether the European Union will be successful in preventing the Americans from creating peace. Today, we are witnessing an attempt at this in Berlin. Unfortunately, since Alaska, Europe has been quite successfully undermining the seemingly emerging Putin-Trump handshake. The problem with Europe is that what it does lacks any real perspective. This is regrettable, but without a doubt, the change in the American administration, in the spirit of confronting reality, has brought about a situation where everyone is now talking about peace. So if one looks at the Western European statements, even if they set impossible conditions or publicize ideas that contradict reality, they are at least already talking about peace. Because the Americans are strong enough that from the moment they want peace negotiations, Europe cannot say, no, we want war. But in reality, what Europe is doing and what is currently taking place in Berlin, organized by the German government, will unfortunately lead to the prolongation of the war.